Good morning. This is the second in a series on Tonglen in an overall discussion of fearlessness. I've chosen to talk about fearlessness because it seems to be the common denominator in how we're all working with the epidemic that's going around the world. And particularly, I'm presenting the Tonglen practices because they are the most significant antidote to fear that I've found in my years of practicing meditation. They're specifically a way to grow your heart, grow your mind, and become a friend to the world. I want to begin today with a quote from Trangur Rinpoche. When we are afraid of ourselves, we fear the world and become very selfish. So when we're thinking about meditation and doing these trainings in compassion and loving kindness, we discovered that there's a certain level of fear of our own minds, a fear of looking deeply at our minds, looking deeply at our psyche, at our neuroses. And in that fear, there's also a fear of the world, and a defensive protectiveness arises. And that's something that becomes very clear in the Tonglen or sending and taking practices. Now, this is something that we can access fairly quickly just by looking at the response of our bodies to fear or not fear. So if I think of something that's very fearful, I can feel the muscles in my body contract. I can feel a tightening. It's almost as though my brain is a sponge being compressed. It's visceral, the sense that fear makes my mind and heart contract. Whereas when I'm doing any of the loving kindness practices or when I'm in a relaxed state in any situation, I can feel a softening in my body, a receptivity, and a kind of clarity. So just testing that out physically, we can see there's an advantage to remaining clear and open and kind, that it is a much more pleasant state to be in. That helps us go forward as we investigate more deeply. So now with the coronavirus, we really see in a way that we can't avoid that we embodied beings are fragile. Our bodies are fragile. Our health is fragile. Life itself is fragile. And I want to read these two quotes from the Four Thoughts That Turn the Mind, which are part of our preliminary practice that helps us set an intention for meditation. They're a way of giving rise to gratitude. Oh, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When we obtain this body, which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to gain the ultimate liberation, joyous result. The nature of phenomena, all phenomena, is impermanence. Death is a certainty for all who are born. Death can descend any time, like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is the time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. So this helps us begin our meditation with the sense of how fortunate it is to have a body, how fortunate it is to have even momentary health or momentary mental clarity. That this is really significant, precious, and we don't want to waste it. What do we want to do with this wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver would say? Death can descend anytime like a drop of dew on a blade of grass. Unpredictable. We could go out today, contract the virus, and our lives could be very, very short in a way that we never would have predicted when we started out the morning. So this gives us the imperative to really think about what is important in life and to do that now, not to waste time, not to waste our lives. And deciding what's important in life is a very significant contemplation. So when we start thinking about that, or certainly when I start thinking about it and I review my life, I can say that there have been certain crisis points in life, and those crisis points have been a big help to me. They certainly brought me to the Dharma. They helped me become a nun, to have the courage to leave my culture and my security. All of these crises can be an open doorway to growth if we want to use them in that way. And even if we don't make a drastic change, even if we're contemplating it to see in our hearts, what do we want from life? We could say, I want better relationships with the people I love. I want to be able to help the people I love. I want to be of benefit to my community. I want to really, in some way, help other beings out of suffering. These are all wonderful aspirations. And then we start to ask ourselves, well, what does that mean? Well, it might mean I wish I was never irritable. I wish I always could look at a situation from a bigger view and see how it's a much better choice to be kind. Instead of angry. I wish I was always kind to the people who seem irritating or annoying, much less to the people I have difficulty with. And so sometimes it can feel like I wish I was a better person or a different person that had this capability. But in the Dharma, that's not the point. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to become a different person. What we're looking at is that we, each and every one of us, have the capacity to have open, receptive kindness and compassion. That this is the nature of mind, of all beings with mind. And we have to look to see what is it that prevents us from maintaining those states. And then looking at that carefully, from my investigation, essentially it's different kinds of fears. We could say that we all have a tangled cloud of fear. We don't want to be hurt physically or mentally. We don't want to be gaslighted, to have confusion. We don't want to hurt others. We don't want to experience scarcity. We don't want to experience any kind of discomfort whatsoever. And that leads us into finding multiple ways of distracting ourselves rather than looking at how to remove the obscuring mist of fearfulness. I want to read a poem. Again, this is one from the earliest nuns from the book, The First Free Women, because I think it's a beautiful expression. She's speaking specifically of avarice and security, but we can look at it in terms of any kind of fear. They all told me the same thing. There's only one way to be truly safe. Get as much as you can and hold on tight. We don't take greed seriously enough. I grew up in a house made of gold, so I ought to know. You see what it does to people. Slowly, over time, it changes them. It takes over. You find yourself saying, I'll learn to be generous. I'll give it all away. But first, I need a little bit more. Stop lying to yourself. See a clenched fist for what it is. Not tomorrow, not in 20 years, now. I am Suba, the goldsmith's daughter, eating whatever is offered, sleeping wherever I can. This is what freedom looks like, not a bucket of coins buried out back. Just like you, I spent a long time going back and forth, but eventually I had to stand up and say out loud, I will not be owned. I find this so compelling, particularly see a clenched fist for what it is, and I will not be owned. Fear, fearlessness. So we don't want to be owned by any of our fears. And particularly now, we can see different kinds of fears arising, different ways of clenching our fist, passing through our mind. And we have the time to sit and think, can we relax that fist just right now, even if it's just a little bit? And this is really what the Tonglen practice helps us to do. So I'm going to review the first two steps, and then we'll go into the second half of the meditation in a little more detail. So the first step, as we spoke about last week, is flashing on that capacity of our mind to be open, relaxed, and kind and compassionate. The spaciousness of the blue sky, the vastness of the blue sky that we can access. For right now, it can just be anything that you find helpful. Image of the sun, the image of the woods or the ocean, anything that helps you just open and relax. And as your meditation develops, that will be a more and more accessible experience for you to flash on what we would say is your absolute capacity. After that flash, we start with something that's just a little uncomfortable. So we're working with if the air were a little bit more dense, if it were a little smoky, or if it smelled a little bad. There would be resistance for breathing in. And so in Tonglen, we're taking in what is uncomfortable and we're breathing out the antidote. We're taking in what we would normally not want, and we're giving away what we want to hold on to for ourselves. And this helps us see how and where is our particular boundary that makes us want to contract, and how can we relax in that moment, welcoming what is, and then being expansive in our heart and mind and giving the openness and the freshness. So the third section of the meditation gets really interesting. In the third section, we ask that you take it to a situation that you can relate to intimately, something that's familiar and normal. So recall a situation in which a loved one was having difficulty of some kind, and you just naturally gave rise to the thought, oh, honey, if I could, I would take this from you. I wish I could, even for a moment, lift your pain, lift your confusion. I would take it on in a minute. So it's that kind of natural response. And the point is becoming familiar with that altruistic core that you naturally have that wants to help, that wants to be of benefit. Now, we breathe that in and then we breathe out what we wish for that person, that being, giving them the good health in the moment that we have, the cup of tea, the warm blanket. The significance is not the story. It's not trying to fix something. It's trying to touch base with your natural altruism of welcoming something difficult. And that response of being open to the voices that are crying in some form or another, and then giving what your clenched fist is holding on to so tightly. So in my life, sometimes I connect with my dog, Emma. I remember animals that I've had as companions that when they're sick, they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand, for instance, that an operation is good for them. And I remember situations of seeing the incredible confusion and pain in their eyes. And so it was very easy for me to just give rise to the thought, oh, if I could, I would just take that on. I really would take it from you. And I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this. That's a situation where I could fairly easily give rise to that. Now, the point of this is actually to start to see where it starts to feel a little edgy, a little difficult. So I had this lovely companion nun, Annie Soltram, who was in her 80s. And we would do this meditation together every Sunday. And she had really difficult arthritis, really painful. She was hunched over, I think they call it the sort of widow's hump. And, clearly her body was in pain a lot of the time. So I'd start to experience and say, oh, I would like to even just for 1 minute take that pain of your body from you. And what would immediately happen would fear would arise in me, the protecting myself from physical pain. So this is where it gets really interesting. We wish we were able to have a bigger heart, a bigger mind. And then when we experiment with that, we see immediately how primal it is to protect ourselves uh, uh, from any kind of physical pain or physical suffering. So this is the point of this section of the meditation, that whatever arises is what in the moment you work with. So if it feels the smallest bit overwhelming, then that's where your work is for this meditation. Not shaming, not wishing you were better. It's not meant to make you feel bad about yourself. It's meant to help you see how you start defending yourself and what that feels like, and then how to relax and open just a tiny bit more all the time. So gradually over time, this has a profound effect. It gives us the ease to maintain a space of clarity and kindness. And when we're maintaining that space of clarity and kindness, the significance is that we can actually, in a wise way, see what might be done, how we could actually be of benefit. When we're clenched, when our fist is clenched and our heart mind is clenched, our focus is always on me. I need to protect me. I am feeling like this. So when you're in that kind of state, you don't have the clarity and wisdom to see how you might be of benefit. So you're training yourself not to be a martyr, but how to maintain your wisest, kindest self in every situation so you can see clearly what's going on and be of benefit. The fourth step is really lovely. The fourth step is quite simple. The fourth step is now see if you can make that bigger. So, for instance, if you're thinking of a child who's hurting, and it's your lovely grandchild or your wonderful, precious baby, you're thinking, oh, I would take this on if I could. I breathe it in and I send you my good health. I send you my clear lungs. I send you my ease. In the fourth step, you could take that to right now in the house next door, the baby is sick. Right now in my neighborhood, many, many children are sick. Can I have this openness this open kindness to even just the child next door and my child with the same level of intensity, with the same strength of love and compassion. And uh, every time you feel the expansion, you push it to what your edge is. Can I take it to all the children who are in the migrant detention centers with the same depth that I take it for my child? And you can see that once you're able to do that, you're hearing the cry of all the children in the same way that you would hear the cry of your child. So we're exercising our compassion in tiny, tiny bite-sized pieces, so that in each session, we can get to our edge and relax with that and open to that fully. And then next time, push it a little further, and next time, push it a little further. So we don't want to get to the point of overwhelm. We want to see what it is like to take in suffering and misery and remain clear-eyed and relaxed so we can see. We can see its impermanence. We can see certainly that we're taking in our own imagination. So it is a thought. What we're taking in is a thought which has no substance whatsoever. And so we see, oh, I can really keep my eyes open to the misery of the world. It will not incapacitate me. In fact, my mind is spacious. And in that spaciousness, the more I can take in, the more I'm able to respond. First, we have to be able to keep our eyes open in the situation. We have to be able to keep our ears open. And then that will move us into the greater capacity to hold the world with kindness and a greater capacity to act. So I'd like to go into the meditation now to each of the 4 sections, and we can do it together. And just as we're starting, to remind all of us that we're doing this so we can see where our edge is, where our narrowness of heart is, and then relax a little bit there, open a little bit more, just in that moment. And cumulatively, we become larger hearted, and we can trust in that. So let's begin. We'll work with a few minutes at each of the stages, and in your meditation, you can work for any length of time, but flashing on the absolute, we say flash, it's going to be fairly momentary. And then I'll guide you through the 3 following steps. So flashing on your absolute perfect heart. Second stage, breathing in a slight, fairly neutral kind of uncomfortable sense of the air. Perhaps it has an odor, perhaps it is smoky, perhaps it is dense. Breathing it in and exhaling fresh air, open-heartedness, not assigning a story, just allowing your sense of a physical sensation, seeing the resistance in your body, seeing the resistance in your mind provoke a resistance in your body, then exhaling relaxed openness. Now recalling a situation in which you naturally had the thought, oh, I would lift this, I would take it on. I'm so sorry you're suffering like this. I would take it on immediately. So breathing in, we imagine ourselves lifting from a dear one, whatever is difficult, and exhaling a sense of comfort, whatever spontaneously arises, but essentially exhaling that relaxed, peaceful, kind, open state. And the fourth stage, make it bigger. Whatever way is natural for you today. It may feel like just touching a hot stove. You quickly want to go back to what naturally arises. Then you look at that. You may be able to stretch a little today. Then do that. You may be able to open a huge door today. Each practice is going to be different, and each practice is going to be valuable. So just a sort of a caveat. This is not about putting ourselves in an unsafe situation or trying to feel like we should stay in an unsafe situation. We should be able to deal with uh, what is arising in that sense. Um, there are other practices for that. We have to be in a safe situation in order to take the time to look at the nature of our mind. We have to create the circumstances in order to eat and uh, observe. In fact, there's a sutra, it's called the Sutra of the Thickets, the thorns, the thickets, that if you're in a situation where you can't be mentally at ease, even if the circumstances are good, like if there are wonderful food offerings and a nice warm room, if there's strife or um, arguing or violence, leave immediately. All right, so this is about observing how fear shuts you down and how that shutting down response blinds you uh, to your own discomfort um, and that of the discomfort of others. Whereas if we're able to look at our discomfort, we can see accurately what the source of that discomfort is, and we can make changes in the same way. If we can open our eyes to the suffering of the world, we're able to at least act more kindly, and as we get more and more skillful, offer ways to hold the hands of others and help them along with us as we walk towards an open heart mind. I often think of my friend Annie Sultram, who I mentioned earlier, and I think the way she worked with it at the end of her life is a helpful example for this. So I think she died when she was about 85, and she was becoming more and more frail, and she was a very tall woman, and she didn't like using her cane, so one day she fell and she broke her hip. And she was in the emergency ward, and at first they give you morphine, but they don't want to give you too much, and you have to wait for it to take effect. So she was in a great deal of pain. And it was the same time that there was the terrible hurricane in Haiti, and there were so many people who couldn't get treatment. And I remember that they were like lying on a wharf. I imagine like a big platform, just with many, many people waiting for treatment. So Annie Sultram said to me, let's practice together. Can we practice Tonglen together? And what she started doing was, in her very extreme pain, she didn't focus on, this is happening to me, this is unbearable. She switched her mind to, just like me, around the world, there are many people in pain. Can I breathe in the suffering that we're all feeling? Not making my suffering more, just breathing in the common humanity and the suffering of bodies. Can I take that in and give to them the freedom from pain that I so want for myself? Can I breathe out with generosity from a larger and bigger heart mind? So, right in that situation, because she had the habit of practicing Tonglen, she could rely on that habit. And in that moment, when she was coming close to her own death, she could put her mind in that larger, more generous, spacious kindness, as opposed to shrinking into her personal situation. So it goes back to How do we want to hold our minds? So certainly it had an effect on me. I've never forgotten that experience. It probably had an effect on the other folks who were coming to visit her and the other folks in the hospital. We can hope that energetically it reached to the folks in Haiti. But the other significant part is she was gradually dissolving the border between my pain being the most important and their pain being less important. And we can see the significance of that state of mind today when we're all um, in shelter in place and quarantining. We don't have to have the mindset of I'm doing this to protect myself and I'm so frightened of the outside world, the virus. Rather, with an open heart mind, we can say, just like me, many, many people are suffering in different degrees. Just like me, all over the world, people are experiencing this situation. Can I lift the fear momentarily and just take it in? Can I, in my imagination, breathe in and experience as a human being that fear actually dissipates as a thought because it's an impermanent, immaterial, transient moment, it dissipates. Can I use that experience to be less afraid of the suffering of others so I can move in the world with a generous, open spirit? So let's uh, continue to work with this. We'll even go more deeply next week. And I want to read another poem to you. This poem, actually, it's a little frightening. I don't want to frighten you about practice, but I want to leave you with an aspiration of courage. This is from Magic Labdran. And we can imagine what fearlessness is like through this verse. Confess your hidden faults. Approach what you find repulsive. Help those you think you cannot help. Anything that you're attached to, give that. Go to the places that scare you. So I'm looking forward as we continue this investigation. And I'll close with the wonderful bodhicitta dedication, the expression of that vast, loving space. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.